Where's the red dot? Welcome to Edge Radio Australia. I'm Aaron Malloy. No, actually Travis. Aaron's chucking a sickie. I think he's still on holiday somewhere, running around doing Aaron things. So we're doing the Greater Wealth as more of a Greater Wealth, more of a podcast today. I do have the man of the hour, Mr. Derek Whittaker, all the way from Whittakerville in Whittakerland. I don't know. I'm just making crap up. Anyway, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm tired. I am wrecked. Didn't have a good night's sleep. This is why these bags are here. No, I had to upgrade a couple of my hard drives into the laptop. So for the last 2 days, I've been frantically trying to repatch everything, rebuild all the operating systems in the back end. And yeah, so if you see me wheel the camera every now and then, that's because I'm authorizing patches and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so 2 days worth of patching. Lovely. So
sounds like fun.
No, not fun. And this is why IT guys get paid so much money, because there's all this little tedious crap that you have to do. And this is why I'm really looking forward to AI, because they would do all of this. It's just not there yet for me. So anyway, we have an amazing show coming up. You don't want to hear about my IT troubles. So where do you want to start for today's show?
Look, I think we should start with what's happening in Australia, and then we'll move abroad. But it's really fascinating. Last week, a story came out about unions. It's been a while since we've heard anything big about unions in Australia in terms of disrupting people's lives day to day. When I was growing up as a kid, we used to have electrical strikes all the time, right? Mum would be just about to put dinner on, and then bang, the electricity would go out. And it was kind of one of those things that just was a real headache. And weird about Australia because, my parents were migrants. So what the unions are doing at this time is actually coming back and threatening to have one of the biggest strikes in history to cripple Australia. Daily Mail Australia reported this, and it's basically saying that an explosive speech, Transport Workers Union National Secretary Michael Caine threatened the widespread plan as 200 enterprise agreements between Australian workers and companies expire next year. What they're doing is that they want to inflict disruptive strikes, collapsing freight and passenger transport networks and choking supermarkets' food supplies. They're looking at agreements between Qantas and Virgin Australia. We're talking Linfox and Toll, Amazon, Aldi. We're talking Boral. We're talking Cleanaway and the airport grounding hand firm Swissport. And they're basically wanting all these groups to come in alignment and orchestrate a big, basically collective bargaining power. They're wanting to utilize the whole thing that we've got a Labor government here. So we've got Labor in power for another 6 years or so because of the big landslide that they have. And they're saying that basically threatening, we're prepared to shut down Australian transport. There will be destruction. It will be significant. It will be coordinated, and it will be effective. Now, this is really interesting because, and if you put the recent footage that we've seen of lately, we've got transport workers unions protesting over safety at Brisbane Airport. They're saying it's over safety reasons here. And that's really interesting in relation to how the unions are wanting to interact with government and also the Australian public. Have you got the footage there, Travis?
Yes.
So let's have a quick look at that. But here they are, as they do with the same old chant that they do in protests typically. What do we want? And they say what they want. And when do we want it? So it's always interesting when it's in relation to transport and airports because it affects tourism and the word gets out around the world. And I think that's basically what they're wanting, to get their attention and the world's attention going on in relation to what their demands might be. It could bite them on the backside if they push too hard because, of course, this disrupts Australians and the general public. It's a fine tension between putting pressure on the public saying, hey, we've got to do this to protest versus getting everyone offside and hating what you're doing. So watch that unfold as these agreements start to come, it will finish up, I should say, in the next 12 months or so. What's your view of unions?
Shaq's son loved this one. So I used to be a part of the workers' union. Obviously, when I left high school, I was a roof tiler. From there, working in the aviation airport construction and stuff like that. So I've had a lot to do with the unions in my time. We were a part of the strike that shut down the building industry for the roof tilers because we were getting paid like $9 an hour or something. After the strike, we we're getting 15. So I personally feel that there is a place for unions. I think that the unions are getting too much power. So, and the other thing I've found, especially working out the airport, generally it's the unions are the ones that actually cause half the problems on building sites by the over regulations. They just make things too complicated, too hard, too slow, too costly. And it gets to the point where the seniors on the site are saying, hey, we've got to hurry up. We've got deadlines to meet. And then the safety officers are getting in everyone's way. And it's just making it really, really frustrating. And so people start taking shortcuts, and that's where the danger starts coming. So I think there is a such thing as over-regulation. I think this is exactly what's happening. I think this is a massive power grab by Albanese, to be 100% honest with you. You've got to remember most of these unions are actually aligned with the Labor Party. Now, Taz, yes. I've been trying to find a decent barber in Vietnam for a while now. Anyway, so I'll say I wasn't too impressed. They left hairs on my lips and stuff like that. So I had to give him a shot to see how he went. But anyway, Luan likes it, but I hate it with a passion. So, but going back to the unions, I think they are a necessary evil, but they need to be the level of power and authority they can have needs to be regulated. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't realize, you can't just go, hey, I'm going on strike. I don't like this. I'm going on strike. It's got to be a lawful strike. You've got to get permission. There's a ombudsman that grants you permission to strike. So the reason for the strike has to be to the same extent to what the issue is. So let's say your work's a day late with your pay every week. So you can't just go shut down the country over something like that. So there's got to be genuine safety concerns of what's going on. The other one is just going on the safety concerns. I was going to make this point earlier, but I got distracted by coffee. Going back on to saying about how the unions are actually cause for most of the safety issues on sites. So when I was working doing the Virgin Pier, the expansion of the Perth International Airport, so Virgin was actually building their own pier, so they didn't have to use all of Qantas' equipment. So what was happening is a lot of the bosses from the unions were actually deliberately standing behind trucks, standing in the way of forklifts, stuff like that, which were making major safety concerns. And so they tried to organise a strike out the building environment saying, oh, there's safety concerns. And it's like, no, you're an idiot that was standing behind a reversing truck, or you were trying to stand between the joints in two trucks and things like that. It's like, bruh. So the union actually got kicked off that building site. So they tried to have a strike. They weren't allowed to. And then they had a big hoo-ha and stuff like that. So I think this is just not backfiring out Albanese, to be 100% honest with you.
Well, the interesting part about this is it's so coordinated. That's what they're threatening. So it's not just one. It's not like just baggage handlers at Qantas airport or have decided to strike. It's not a case of just one small group, which is affecting one particular company and one particular sector. This is wanting to do it en masse. We're talking not only the airlines, but we're also talking about supermarket chains. And I think they've got to be very careful in terms of how they handle this with food, particularly. And if people are hungry, they're going to rise up.
Yeah, so this is the thing I found with union. They're thugs. That's the best way to describe them. They've got an agenda that they want to push worse than the Australian government. So ultimately, it comes down to how much money can the union get back into their back pocket. So you got to remember, your union fees are a percentage of what you earn. So the more they get the workers to increase their wages, the more the union earns. So it's just another case of follow the money. So I'm actually 100% against unions these days, the way they are structured in Australia. There was a reason the workers' union was actually disbanded into all these other different ones. They were just too big, too powerful. Again, if they turn around and they start acting physically, or if you can't get food and people start starving, the ombudsman starts stepping immediately. And then what happens is any union workers that don't rock up to work on those days, their employer has a grounds to fire them on the spot for that one because they've abandoned their work. So that's under the Fair Work legislation. So what happens is there's such a low unemployment rate in Australia at the moment. So if the workers themselves have to be really careful, because the bosses are getting paid by the union. So they don't care. They're getting paid to do what they do, even if they do shut down. But it's the lower of the run, the entry-level workers' unions, that they will get given instructions to stop work. And if they stop work and get fired, can they then go back on the union saying, hey, you told me to stop work, I got fired, find me more work? So this is a real tightrope that the unions are playing on this one, because there's a lot of, pretty much everyone's got a camera these days. They've got to be really careful, because when we were striking, the unions were telling us, and it was 7 weeks we shut down the building industry for. So it was bad. So what was happening is a lot of the builders in WA were actually reaching out to New Zealand, flying in roof tilers to WA to go do the work. And we were under instructions, if we saw anyone working, we were to pop their tyres on their cars and literally go to town on them so they don't work. So it totally shut down the building industry. If that was to happen today, there's a very, very good chance we'd all end up in jail, because there's zombie cameras everywhere. And you see how much of a thug most of the union workers are. So. Oh, here we go. Taz, you got a comment here for us. By the way, welcome to the stream. Fired from Coles, the union rep made sure I got my remaining holidays and leave pay because I claimed it back that I was being fired because of favoritism towards other workers. So this is an absolute perfect example of why the unions are important. So don't get me wrong. It's not that I hate unions or the concept of the unions. I think that there's a purpose behind the unions. They're just getting too involved in politics, and they're trying to push too much stuff. So, for example, there was a lot of people who didn't want to get a certain needle. The unions should have stepped up, said, right, this is going against your rights as an individual. No, you're not doing it. That's where the union should be stepping up, but they weren't. They were actually helping the government to enforce it. So there's a lot of the times when politics gets involved in the basis of a job for someone, it kind of wrecks what the original origins for that was. So yeah, Taz, absolutely. I think the workers' union did the right thing.
That's the very thing that might backfire. Where were you during those mandated era? During that mandated era, you weren't there for us. You know, and there were so many workers that were affected by that, to the point where the public was affected by that. You particularly look in the health sector and that. How many great nurses and doctors and physicians did we lose because of these mandates?
Yeah, it's not just that. Like, you also look at the orderlies, the teachers' assistants, all the support staff as well. Because a lot of, like, let's look at politics. The politicians themselves didn't need to they weren't mandated, but all their support staff were. So would the politicians do their job properly if they had none of the support staff? So that's where it's really interesting, because there's a lot of other countries that are now outlawing what happened and saying that, you know, it was coercion and stuff like that. When's Australia actually going to do a full investigation into what's going on? And that's what I'm really looking forward to. And just for interest of transparency, yes, we do have an active case going through the courts. There was a ruling on unfair dismissal where the court literally stated that if the mandates are deemed that they were forced and coerced, then we've got grounds for appeal. But until that happens, we're kind of like stuck in limbo in Australia. So yeah, but the unions, I think they're definitely barking up the wrong tree on this one. I think they're actually going to hurt Albanese more, because if you have a look at it on a voters-based side of things, the cost of, and there was a really good interview, and I hate to say this, on the ABC, they were talking to one of the Labor insiders, and they were talking about how well the economy is going, all this sort of stuff, and what are the big challenges Labor have got moving forward. Even though there's a budget deficit, a surplus, which means the amount of debt is going down or the amount of money we're spending is going down, the cost of living and the quality of life is actually getting worse. So what happens is, like, yeah, you're doing things now to make the budget look good, but it's not trickling through to the everyday worker. And if that's getting worse and worse and worse, and then the union starts having strikes, there's no food in the supermarket, the powers are going off, you can't get your gizmos off Temu and all that sort of stuff. So what's going to happen? People don't get angrier and angrier and angrier. And who gives the unions their instructions on what to do? Labor. And who's in power at the moment? Labor. So I think if the unions are allowed to do this, I think this is just one step down communism. Like, I think we should start calling everyone Conrad rather than mate and Cobber. Conrad Cobber.
Well, it could be the thing that breaks the camel's back, and that might be the thing that makes people wake up. It's going to be interesting how this unfolds if they actually go ahead and implement this. I mean, at the end of the day, a business is a place to make a buck, and they don't want to have disruptions. Unless you're in Australia. What's that?
Unless you're in Australia, you're just there to, like, pay for the wages of the workers. Why do you think so many businesses are leaving Australia? Like, it's just stupid.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, okay. That aside, let's keep it really simple, though. The basic business, criteria of a business to make a profit, right? and they do it safely. Now, of course, the Industrial Revolution, if you go back in time when unions were formed, using child labour in the Industrial Revolution was terrible. The conditions that these kids had to work through, shocking. You know, lose a finger, lose a hand. You know, that's it for life. You can't work. You can't supply and feed your family. So this is where it's come from.
Yeah, there's an absolute purpose for the unions. They're not a political arm of they're not an arm of the political parties. But to be honest with you, this doesn't sound really, probably nasty is the best description for it. I want this strike to succeed. Now you're probably thinking, isn't this against the people? No, we just saw in the election results, there's probably still a good 60% of Australians, 70% of Australians who have their head in the sand. They don't understand that the two-party preferred system is what's destroying everything. So Labor is the worst thing to ever happen to us. Early Labor was good. The current Labor is shocking. Like, it's just really bad. The Liberals keep chasing Labor, so they're no good anyway. They need to be standing up for what their original morals were. Australians need to suffer before they'll dig their heels in and say, nah, enough's enough. And I was hoping they would say, yep, enough's enough out of the last election. But clearly, a vast majority is still thinking that Labor's going to save them, Liberals are going to save them. They're not. So they've got to suffer drastically before there's going to be drastic change. So I hate to say it, I saw this coming. We got out of Australia, and I think Australians need to suffer for probably another 3 to 5 years before they start waking up. And I feel really sorry for all the people that don't lose their jobs, businesses that don't go bankrupt, stuff like that. But you have the ultimate power when you vote, and you voted for an idiot.
Well, you got to remember, 2/3 of the people didn't vote for the Labor government. They won 33%.
Yeah, but a third also voted for Liberals.
Sorry?
A third voted for the Liberals, who aren't much better because they just keep chasing Labor. So if let's say one party is going off a cliff, and the other one's going, oh, wait, I want to go with you, would you follow the two that are jumping off the cliff?
And that brings up a very interesting point with the split in the coalition over the last week, with the Nationals saying, no, we don't want to be a part of Liberal anymore.
But they're already negotiating to come back together. Like, I think that the news cycle was going against them, so they're just like, yep, no worries, we'll go do something.
Regardless, it should be a lift of, hey, if you haven't looked under the bonnet yet, it's time to lift the lid and have a look at where things are going as far as the nation is concerned, and in relation to, of course, where politics is concerned, how that directly has an influence on your life. Looks like we've lost Travis for the meantime. But
yeah, it's just my camera's being stupid.
Okay.
So, yeah, I am here. Let's try this. Let it reset for a moment. But yeah, anyway, keep going, Derek.
That's okay. All right. Let's have a look at this really fascinating cases coming out through the courts at the moment in Victoria. The Australian judge rules that Bitcoin is cash, and that is putting the ATO's crypto taxation on notice. So up till now, what the ATO has done is they've wanted to put capital gains tax on Bitcoin in particular. But a very interesting case has come through the courts in Victoria, where a police officer from the Australian Federal Police was convicted and stole 81.6 Bitcoin in 2019. At the time, that was about $460,000 worth. Today, that Bitcoin is now worth over $13 million. And what is going on is that a lot of the magistrates were just going, look, well, the defense was arguing that it was just information that was going on that was stolen here. But it's being held on appeal, which means that the Bitcoin transactions made after 2019 are not subject to capital gains tax, potentially resulting in tax refunds of hundreds of millions of dollars, the press is saying. This Victorian magistrate ruled that Bitcoin is comparable to Australian dollars and should therefore be exempt from capital gains tax. And the ruling flies in the face of what the ATO and the way they've been treating Bitcoin. That's seen holders required to pay capital gains tax on their Bitcoin transactions since 2014. The magistrate, Michael O'Connor, made the ruling during a case in which William Wheatley, the former Australian Federal Police officer, he had stolen this, and it was valued at $492,000 at the time. Magistrate O'Connor ruled that Bitcoin is a form of property, but more akin to Australian dollars and its gold or shares. And this could mean that just like transactions using Australian dollars, transactions using Bitcoin should not be subject to capital gains tax. If it's upheld on appeal, that basically means that $1 billion in capital gains tax refunds to Bitcoin holders who paid capital gains tax on transactions might come forward, according to Adrian Cutler, the taxation lawyer who acted as co-barrister for the defense in the case. The defense has argued that Bitcoin isn't property at all, but it is instead information, therefore can't be stolen. Some say that sounds a little far-fetched, and there isn't any, but the fact is there isn't any established legal basis in Australia for treating Bitcoin as property. And despite its lack of clarity, the ATO has just followed the convention of treating Bitcoin as property since 2014. So this is a really, really fascinating case that is going on. And there's no case law which has actually established cryptocurrency to be property for the purpose of criminal law. Nevertheless, it has been routinely, I should say, been treated as property in proceeds of crime cases and family law matters. And this is what Magistrate O'Connell was observing. He said, in my view, that being a form of money is sufficient to enable Bitcoin to be characterized as property, that is, to use the words of the statute, as other intangible property, and I so rule. So that's really big news as far as taxation is concerned, as far as cryptocurrency is concerned in this nation. And also this kind of debate that's often happened where, is it an asset or is it a currency? And this is what has been really argued. I think if you look at the original reason why Bitcoin was created, it was sick and tired of the banks creating money out of thin air, central banks that do that. And they wanted to come up with a way that was independent, that if the banks went down, as they did in the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, that they could have a form of exchange that was outside of that system, hence why Bitcoin was created. Of course, who did it was Satoshi Nakamoto. Of course, who is Satoshi? It's been a bit of a pseudonym for the creation of this. But as I've said many, many times, the tube is out of the toothpaste. Where do you go from here? And so this is what's being debated amongst legislators. Is it actually an asset or is it a currency? Because as you know, if you receive dollars and cents in fiat currency, as we call that, you're not taxed on that in the sense of its income tax, but the actual money itself isn't taxed. If you use that money to go buy your groceries, you're not taxed on that exchange of funds. Whereas with crypto, the way the Australian Taxation Office has moved on that is that it said, well, it is a taxable event. This case throws that into question completely. So it's going to be really interesting. Now, that doesn't mean that affects all other cryptocurrencies as far as alternative coins are concerned, or altcoins as they call them in the game. But it does put into effect what is going on. Now, this is fascinating too in terms of the legislations that are passing on cryptocurrency in the United States right now. The Trump administration has realized that it needs to rise up and be the leader as far as issuing cryptocurrency in the world is concerned. Why? Because they're concerns about the US dollar. As you've seen, many nations abandon it because of the petrodollar. Petrodollar being the effect that you have to do trade deals for oil in US dollars. Well, that was not renewed in 2024 by Saudi Arabia. So that agreement had gone on for 50 years. And when you have high demand for your currency, everybody wants a piece of it. Because of that, the United States has realized, hey, we need to catch up. Instead of persecuting crypto companies, as it has been doing through the SEC, which is the ruling body of regulatory control in the United States, much like our ASIC here in Australia, this is a big spin in the works, because they're now going, we want to work with a legislative framework. There is regulation in the game. And the cryptocurrency, especially the stablecoin industry, has been wanting that as well. Stablecoin being a crypto that will represent the underlying one-for-one pairing. So if you have a USDT, for example, that one coin is representing what the value of $1 is at the time, just in the form of a digital coin, the USDT. There are other coins like that as well that have emerged on the markets. And so again, it comes into, with stablecoin legislation going on, transactions wanting to take place across borders, which is we have a clunky system under the SWIFT system as it's been for so long. This legislation for Australia is very, very interesting. It's kind of moving in that same direction. Not sure how much you heard of that, Travis, but welcome back.
Most of it, I had to switch browsers, and I'm not logged into that browser, so I had to get you to let me in. So then I had to log into another browser to let myself in, and it's all good. So my question is, which branch of legislation actually said that it is considered has an equal value to currency?
It hasn't yet. What it's doing, it's putting into question, it's a view by the magistrate that is contrary to the Australian Taxation Office in how they view cryptocurrency as property as opposed to money. And that's the whole thing here. Because it was stolen by a federal police officer, they're trying to look at what was the value at the time, what's the value now, and of course, the argument of capital gains tax comes into play here. What's it worth now in terms of that? So it's a really fascinating case study right here that's unfolding in the Victorian courts.
I think it needs to be done. I personally think this will probably end up in the High Court of Australia. Any questions relating to currency? So the Australian Constitution actually outlines what can and can't be considered currency. So it's actually up to the federal government to determine that. My understanding, only the High Court has the authority to be able to overturn or to interpret legislation to create laws. So normal magistrates or a Supreme Court can't do that in Australia. So this is going to be a really, really interesting one. I can't remember what section of the legislation, but you know how there was that big argument over what is considered legal tender. So the Constitution only states who has the authority to state what is legal tender. So, for example, let's say the government decides they don't want the 5-cent piece anymore. So they can just turn around and go, yep, no worries, let's pass a bill through Parliament saying we no longer want the 5-cent piece. It's not economical. This is the reason we're scrapping it. And then they can just scrap it. So the government can very easily bypass all of this. All they have to do is turn around and go, you know what? We're not recognise crypto as a legal tender in Australia. And all of this argument goes away.
The issue for me is outward pressure. That's going to have to change as far as Australia is concerned, because the world is going in this direction. Even not outside of the United States, European Union has put a lot of legislation in Europe regarding where cryptocurrency sits. And I think you see also the United Kingdom seeking legislation right now in cooperation with their friends across the pond, the Atlantic, the United States, and wanting to do cooperatives there. England is desperate to trade. And so it will, because of its argy-bargy with the whole Brexit European Union, you've now got a prime minister who said, we're out, we'll go deal with US. Oh, look, we want to go back in and deal with the EU now. And then he's playing both sides here. It'll be interesting if that backfires on him. Regardless, they have got to move. The world is going, look, if the United States is going to move, the biggest economy in the world is passing all this legislation on crypto and stable coins and all that. We have got to get on board because the banking system is changing behind the scenes.
The thing that a lot of Australians fail to understand is the Australian Constitution is an amazing document. The federal government doesn't really follow it that well. They sort of like pick and choose which ones they want to follow. I think the reason they're being so wait and see with the cryptocurrency is they're probably trying to figure out a way how they can make it so they can control it. We saw that with the news on social media platforms in Australia. They try to get their hands into everything. They try to control everything. And this is why, even though I'm in what's considered a socialist republic of Vietnam, I actually have a lot more freedoms in Vietnam on who I deal with, what business I do, and all that sort of stuff than what I actually do in Australia. Australia regulates everything to high heaven. So I just want to quickly have a look at some of these comments from Josh. Watch everyone move their super into crypto. To be honest with you, I actually don't think that's a bad idea. Maybe not all of it. I'm still a big fan of property. But yeah, I think everyone should have at least some sort of crypto portfolio. Now, Derek, you did a really good, Luan did the course with you. What was that course you did for her? Because I didn't do it. I was doing the options trading. Luan did the crypto side of things.
Yeah, it's called Prepare to Prosper 2024. And I still call it, I'm still, working with it in 2025. The reason I deliberately call it 2024 is because there are opportunities that are disappearing very quickly we probably won't be looking at in 6-7 years, or they won't be as good as they are now. And I think what the big thing is, you don't just throw money at crypto. You've got to be very selective if you're going to get into that space as to what you actually invest in. There's so many, I believe 95% to 98% of those projects will not be around due to legislation, regulation in the next 5 to 6 years. So, if you don't know what you're doing and you haven't done your research, throwing all your super into crypto could be very dangerous potentially. So, you've got to get advice from a licensed financial planner in that instance. I provide the education in terms of what's going on and behind the scenes.
I have to confess to something. I did have a journey into crypto when it first came out. It totally, I totally stuffed it up. So that would cost me probably about $8,000 or $9,000. So yeah, you can lose money in crypto, but you can also make stupid amounts of money. So if you look at the one, she's more than made up for what I lost. So it's fine.
Look, I was in a meeting recently discussing some things with some pretty sophisticated type investors in that. And I came back to the basics of what I teach in my courses, and it's simple. Investing is simply an opportunity to do one or two things. It's an opportunity to make money, or it's an opportunity to lose money. It really is that simple. And people try to glamorize it and make it, really sparkly and all that sort of stuff. If you put it in very basic terms, that's what it does. And that's why strategy and also risk management particularly are so important when it comes to investments.
So keep going with Josh here. Do not trust stable coins. Nowhere near enough oversight to guarantee they actually have the money to back them. That was FTX was a really big example and an eye opener for a lot of people how dangerous some of this crypto can be, especially when you got superstar endorsements like LeBron James, not the GOAT. Michael Jordan is. And this is actually what I argued for a long time. We should tax crypto the same way any other currency, only for income. I think anything should only be taxed on your realized gains. So, and it should take, so this is one thing that I really hate about Australia. Let's say you do have a crypto account. Let's say you purchase some Bitcoin, you times two your money, you sell some of the Bitcoin, profit, but then you purchase more crypto, like you've capitalized your earnings. So you've diversified from, say, just Bitcoin to, say, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So have you actually made money there?
You've reinvested.
So that's a business expense. So I don't believe you should be taxed in that situation.
Yeah. And there's often argument, too, that in two instances, I think the latter is the more pertinent one. You can do a swap from crypto to crypto without going back into fiat. Well, how do you tax that? How do you measure that? If you're changing your Ethereum into Bitcoin. And the other part of that too is that on some decentralized exchanges, you can actually wrap a coin, which basically means for it to work and get an outcome in that ecosystem of decentralized finance, the actual programming behind the coin needs to change. Well, the view of the ATO at the moment is that is a taxable event. And I would argue, no, it's not. It's somebody trying to use their coin for some real world function or result. And therefore, why they're being penalized for that every time they wrap it or unwrap it back to the original coin. And I think this really needs to be reviewed. I think a lot of it, they've allowed it in Australia because they see it as a cash cow. We can tax this. And they're trying to tax it left, right, and center. But as more mainstream adoption comes into play, it's really overdue to relook at how we actually view this sector because it's not going to go away. It's only going to get bigger.
Exactly. So Josh is sort of like the residential guru when it comes to crypto. He loves it. He's got Bitcoin bleeding out of his skin. I don't like capital gains tax. It incentivizes the government to inflate the currency. If inflation is 10% and my asset increases 10%, then I have gained nothing but still pay tax. 100% right. What I'd love to see is people get tax cuts based on the inflation rate. So let's say you earn $100,000. Let's say you earn $100,000 for the year, but inflation is out 5%. And so let's say I don't know what tax bracket is. Let's just say it averages out at 30%. So you shouldn't have to pay 30% tax. You should be paying 25% tax because of inflation. It's a hidden tax. That's something I'd love to see. Hard to calculate. Don't ask me how to sort that one out. That's for people.
I don't want to see a situation where they're trying to pass legislation in Victoria on farmland at the moment where land is increased and so council rates are going up simply because it's on the valuation of the land. And these are unrealized gains and hurting farmers who already have cash flow issues trying to, put food on our table, and they're getting hit with taxation that's basically on the capital growth of the equity in their property and not as opposed to their income.
That happens everywhere. So your council rates are based off your gross taxable, gross rental income. So what they do, they adjust your rates based on how much rent you can get for your property. So just as rental prices go through the roof, I own my house, it doesn't affect me. Bullshit, your rates are going up. So that's the thing. So a lot of people don't realize there's every way you turn in Australia, you're getting taxed or fees or government charges of some kind everywhere. I read a report somewhere saying that 97% of every dollar, so 97 cents in every dollar that you earn, goes back to the government in some form of tax. So you're really only saving 3% of all the money you earn. Like, how are people supposed to survive with that? And then they chuck all these new taxes onto it. At what point does it become, 100, 101, 102%, where every year you're actively going backwards? I think a lot of retirees, especially pensioners who own the house outright, I think already they're starting to go backwards because I'm hearing more and more people saying, like, I still get phone calls from when I was doing mortgages saying, oh, I need a reverse mortgage. So for people who don't know what a reverse mortgage is, they take the equity as a payment. And the bank goes, oh, we'll set up a mortgage for you. Here's your limit. And they will transfer a certain amount into your bank account. They know you can't work. There's no way you can pay this off. The exit strategy is when you die, they'll take the ownership of the house.
Mm-hmm. Like, unless life insurance pays it out.
Yeah, that shits me to sorry about my swearing, but that shits me to tears. We need to be protecting our pensioners. We need to be making it so people have a chance to get ahead in life. Taxing unrealized gains is just mentally insane. So anyway,
if you don't think this is important, you might be thinking, well, taxes is whatever. It's not actually whatever. It's affected history so much. The 4th of July celebrations in the United States, King George's taxes on tea and all this sort of stuff. That Boston Tea Party they had in the US, which affected the US Revolution, was about British taxes on the colonialists at that time. Even the birth of Christ surrounded taxation, of course. The Romans insisting they wanted to do a census, and of course, they had very heavy taxes back at those times. Revolutions come out of taxation. So don't just dismiss this as boring rhetoric. No, when it's hurting and people can't put food on their tables, feed their families, revolutions are born. And Australia's in an interesting space here because I don't think, as you said before, people have woken up to it. They haven't felt enough pain. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes, that much pain for people to finally act. And I see this all the time in education space of finance. I look at some people who aren't putting in the effort to do courses, or they don't want to join the courses yet. And I go, they're not ready for it because they're not in enough painful position. And, psychology 101, people are motivated by pleasure versus pain.
Yep. Most great inventions come from laziness. So if you have a look at people like convenience, I think at the moment, things are just really, really convenient for Australians because our incomes are so high. It's easier to absorb these little jabs here and there. But at what point does the constant pay rises counter to the increase in the taxes? Once the wages start plateauing or coming down, like when there's just too many people in Australia and like you've got a plethora of all these people who can choose to do a job, all of a sudden there's competition for jobs again. Pay rises won't be coming in every year. I think this is one of the reasons why the unions are getting really active at the moment because they can see the change coming. So anyway, you had a really good segue across to these other 2 points you got here. I can see these slides, Trump and Trump. So
let's have a look at the next one here. So speaking of taxes, it's been really interesting to see this big, beautiful bill, as Trump has called it and labeled it.
Derek, because I'm a guest, you don't have to click on it. Just add to studio. or add to stage.
Okay. It's not there.
It's not
That's
there for
okay.
you?
No. So that's fine. So let's have a look at. I'll read it to you in relation to what it was saying. He basically truthed out, as Trump likes to do things, and has really changed the whole scene as far as what the president actually speaks. He says the one big beautiful bill has passed the House of Representatives. This is arguably the most significant piece of legislation that will ever be signed in the history of our country. The bill includes massive tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax deductions when you purchase an American-made vehicle, along with stronger border security measures, pay rises for our ICE and Border Patrol agents, funding for the Golden Dome, Trump savings accounts for newborn babies, and much more. Great job by Speaker Mike Johnson and the House leadership, and thank you to every Republican who voted yes on the historic bill. Now it's time for our friends in the United States Senate to get to work and send this bill to my desk as soon as possible. There is no time to waste. The Democrats have lost control of themselves and are aimlessly wandering around showing no confidence, grit, or determination. They have forgotten their landslide loss of the presidential election and are warped in the past, hoping someday to revive open borders for the world's criminals to be able to pour into our country, men to be able to play in women's sports, and transgender for everybody. They don't realize that these things and so many more like them will never again happen. So if you break down those tax cuts, he's talking there about the big ones that have been marketed, of course, are no tax on tips. So waitresses and waiters can work and not have to pay tax on those tips. No tax on overtime was part of his campaign policy. For a lot of people, that's huge. And the incentive behind that is he wants to get America working and producing and manufacturing. So there gives incentive for people to, you can earn all this overtime money and not have to pay tax on it. And of course, then it has other tax deductions and massive tax cuts as well. Vehicle industry, trying to target that as well. Instead of people buying cars from Europe and overseas, he wants them making and buying American-made vehicles. And this is really interesting. Of course, funding for the Golden Dome. What does it mean by this? This is a big defense mechanism that he wants to bring in place where he can copy Israel's model of anti-missile aircrafts from space so that any missile trying to invade US skies can be intercepted. Now, this is a massive in terms of thinking. You can think of all the billions of dollars that would require. What America is doing is spending big on defense and basically trying to have peace through strong defense systems in place. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this big, beautiful bill, as they call it.
So there's actually a lot more that I don't view the world this way normal people do. That's one thing I've learned very quickly. So first of all, let's go to the Golden Dome, $25 billion, I think it was from memory. So what it is, a lot of countries are now getting access to intercontinental ballistic missiles, which means they go up into space, go across, and then come straight down to wherever they need to be. So while they're in space, they're really, really hard to intercept. It's when they're coming down. It's sort of like shooting a bullet with another bullet. It's extremely hard. It's just insane. But then when you start looking at places like Iran, that's getting closer, having nuclear capabilities, Pakistan, India's got it, South Korea's got it. A lot of countries around the world actually have nuclear capability. This is going to be very, very problematic because even though America's got the largest military in the world, how do you stop a nuclear warhead? Like, it's next to impossible. So they've got to do something to be able to defend themselves. So I think the fact it's taking this on to create this sort of technology, I'm dumbfounded. Like, this should have been done the moment they started developing nuclear warheads. They should have started developing, right, how do we defend ourselves against a nuclear warhead? And having more nuclear warheads is not the answer. So anyway, so the other one I want to bring back. So
Reagan had this concept of Star Wars going on.
Yeah.
He did try to bring that into play.
Yeah, but it never passed. It never actually got done. So this big, beautiful bill got it done. And how long ago was Reagan in office? What, 50 years ago? So anyway, so going back to this big, beautiful bill, I've seen reports saying that it passed 100-0. So everyone voted for it, both the Democrats and the Republicans. It just passed easy, straight through. So why do you think the Democrats actually passed this bill? This is one thing that I'm seeing a lot of people not question. And I think I've got an answer. So first of all, where do all the blue-haired people work? Starbucks. they live off tips. And if they don't work at Starbucks, where do they work? Their ethos on OnlyFans. That's 100% tip money. So, like, why would you vote against something that's going to take money from your voters? So I think this is actually a start where the Democrats are finally waking up and going, you know what? We're on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue here. We need to be supporting our voter base. I think America and the republics have to be aware that and awake that, hey, is this a changing of the guard for the Democrats? Are they finally talking to people and just, rather than trying to cram stuff down their throats, like, oh, what are we offended about this week? They're actually going, okay, what can we do to help you guys out? What can we do to make you vote for us? So I'm a little bit worried that this is actually the start of the fight back from the Democrats.
It's interesting because there's a lot more in this bill when you start digging deeper to it. You know, it's really looking at increasing, gross domestic GDP. Pardon me. It wants to increase productivity in the United States. It wants to give tax cuts to the American families. It wants to deliver more wages to workers, right? Giving people incentive to work. It's also helping with families as well with 2 children or more. It's delivering up to $13,300 in more take-up home pay for a family of 2 kids. It's looking at, expanding education savings account for American families, getting materials. It's supportive of homeschooling. There's a lot in this is going on that is covered in it with when you look deeper into it.
I think it's phenomenal. You also got to remember this started back in 2016 when he did the first round of tax cuts for the lower and middle class in America. So they were actually due to expire this year. So what's happened is this big, beautiful bill has actually cemented those tax cuts into legislation. It was no longer just an executive order forcing those tax cuts. So this is effectively Trump promised he was going to do this, and he's delivered. Same as all the other promises that he's done. And I've got to bring this comment up from Josh. Watching Trump hold the South African president feet to the fire was a glorious thing. Pretty funny watching the lefty media scramble to cover for the crimes against whiteys. So the bit that I thought was like, I knew something when I got sent the video, said, oh, you got to watch this. I didn't see any headings or anything. I was just, oh, yeah, Trump do another press release from Forbes. I have to give a shout out to Forbes for this one. They set the camera up, let it play. There's no editing, no narration. It's just raw facts. So Forbes is doing a really good job with that. And when you see the lights, he starts calling I think it's Anita, he's the secretary. Oh, have we got that video? Have we got that video? And you see the president turn around, look at one of his aides, and you can see all the way around his eyes. He's like, what the shit is this? So I had tears running down my face with laughter. That one was awesome. Sad what's happening to the white farmers. And this just proves again that Australia especially our government, are a bunch of very, very nasty people, because those South African farmers were seeking asylum to Australia, 12,500 of them, and we turned them away. But yet we're more than happy to bring in terrorism as asylum seekers. That's fine. So New Zealand, they got one up on us with that one, picking up some very, very skilled, very experienced farmers, people that are actually going to help with the GDP, where Australia just let the ball drop on that one. Like, we failed miserably on that one. So,
and I think people don't realise it's not just against white farmers the problems in terms of genocide, but I was talking to someone who was from South Africa that wanting to set up a charitable organisation. This is going back a year and a half ago. And you've got white people, middle class, in slums now because they're not able to get jobs. And these are educated people who are smart, and they're living in slums, basically, because they can't get employment. And so this is like political correctness on overdrive. Any prejudice, whether it be against anyone, it's damaging itself. People go, we're going to get back, and revenge and all this sort of stuff. It just doesn't work. It really doesn't.
The one I always laugh about South Africa, there was a scene, I don't know if it was some sort of sporting event. Can't remember what it was. Anyway, so the president is sitting there, he's doing this big speech, and he's got the sign language dude going, making all these signs and that. And I'm allowed to say, because the guy wasn't actually signing anything. He was just making the whole entire lot up. And he got paid something like $58,000 US dollars to sit there and pretend to sign language to people. It's absolutely hilarious. So go Google it, look it up. It's all over YouTube. That's the level of corruption within the South African government. It's on a whole another level. So,
well, I think what's fascinating and sad was that the mainstream media denied it all. and basically said Trump is making this up. It's an ambush. They tried to put all that discrediting on board. But you actually talk to the people from South Africa, and they're saying it's real. They've got family back there. I've got South African friends. I got someone here in the southwest of Western Australia here who's from South Africa, who is a farmer, and she's it's happening. They've got contacts back there. The real message is not getting out to the mainstream. And what Trump has done is put it into the talk now, where this has been ignored for so long. And now the mainstream media have to address it, even if they're in denial. It's putting it on the radar. So this is stage one.
Yep. So Josh does have a comment here. I'll encourage people to go have a read of it. I'm not going to read it out for the simple fact there's two words in here. One starts with P and one starts with A. They're not swear words or anything, but I'm just a little bit worried that algorithms on Facebook and social media and all that's going to ban it. So I'm going to slightly censor myself with this one. South Africa should be a something, just like during something. And we shouldn't help bail them out when they are starving because they don't know how to farm. So I think it's one of those situations where with South Africa, it's a FAFO moment. If you're going to mess around, I think you need to find out, and you need some serious hurt to actually understand how badly you stuffed up. But I hate to say it, I agree with Josh in that situation. So awesome, Jerry. Welcome to the stream, by the way. So, yeah, it's just, South Africa is a funny one. They've always been a messed up country, and it comes across when you deal with some of the people from there. One of our old tenants was South African, and he was hilarious. But the house we had was in a really, really bad area. It was one of the first investment properties we ever purchased, and it got to the point where every week they were kicking the walls to try and break into this house. So I said, look, he was homeless at the time up in Geraldton. I said, look, feel free, stay in my house, just pay the water power, I don't care. Just stop them from breaking it. That's all I ask. Me not charging you rent will save me more money than fixing all the damage that is constantly happening up in Geraldton. Anyway, so within about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, all damage stopped immediately. And I was walking through Geraldton buying building materials, and I had these people coming up to me going, oh, why have you put that person in the house? That's our house. And it's like, no, it's my house. Go F off. Anyway, so I haven't dug up the backyard because I'm not sure what I'll find, but it's just they don't mess around. I think he was also a whitey, as Josh put it, but I think years of open fear for your life has just put you to a point where you don't mess around. If they come at you aim to kill, because if you don't, they will. And I think that's half the reason why a lot of South Africans are so. What would you use?
The Afrikaner is tough, and they're fighters. They've had to fight for what they've got, and that culture is, passed on to their children. They will fight, and I have been to South Africa a long time ago, but I have been there, and you can appreciate what has gone on in terms of the civil unrest, and everything that went on. And I mean, South Africa at one time was a very prosperous nation. It had to become self-reliant because it had so much, quarantine during the apartheid era. Now, I'm not here promoting apartheid by any means, stretch of the imagination, but it was self-independent and very wealthy. They've had so much wealth, gold and diamonds coming out of this nation. In my experience, a lot of my friendships from South Africa, the beautiful people, their hospitality is incredible. But again, the internal corruption that has occurred. I mean, South Africa, when I was there in the 90s, I was like, this is going to take generations to heal. It really is not going to happen overnight.
So we do have a gate crasher. I'm just jumping into the other account where my cameras don't work, and I'm going to see if I can get this guy in.
While you're doing that, it's really interesting that Trump has delayed the 50% tariffs on the European Union to July 9. That's really, really big news because, of course, it's kind of come to a point where they were negotiating, wanting to reach a good deal, and Trump got to the point where the European Union has been out to destroy America and its strength and power. It started quite low. It got up to 50%. I think it was at 20% originally. And then Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU, has basically said, can we have an extension to July 9? Trump said it's my privilege to do so. But there's some tough negotiating going there as far as the EU is concerned.
So we have now Shaq in the studio as well. He's just muted himself. We do have that.
I have been back here for like 10 minutes, but yeah.
No, I haven't been able to let you in because I was on the other webpage. We do have that post here from Donald Trump. So it's interesting to see that.
This is on the iPhone case. Basically, he's saying, Apple, if you do not manufacture your iPhones in the US and they're built here and not in India or any other place, you're going to face 25% tariffs on that as well. So, yeah, he's being tough on American companies in that matter. You better manufacture them abroad here, onshore.
So it's just, but he's always said this was going to happen. Apple's already done huge investments into America. Like, I get where Trump's coming from, but I also think Apple should be allowed to build wherever they want. But if they choose not to build in America, then they pay a tariff. That's the cost of entering into the American market. So, like, each side has their options of what they can do, like, and it's up to them whether they want to pay the bill or not.
Yeah,
but then it becomes a mathematical equation, right? It becomes an equation of, is it worth spending, the tens of billions of dollars in some cases it's required to move factories to the United States. What you'll end up having is what you see with a lot of the German manufacturers like Mercedes and Porsche and companies like that. When you go to the United States, their Mercedes are often made and manufactured in the United States. But when you go outside of the US, they're manufactured elsewhere, like Germany, or in the case of Australia, for many years there, the Mercedes that we were buying and the BMWs, I think, that we were buying were manufactured in South Africa. So that was something that you were just talking about. So I think what you'll see is that some companies will move some manufacturing to the United States, but it will only be the manufacturing that is going to be there for the domestic market. And if they can't resolve the issue with Canada, then Canada will start buying the iPhone from a British supplier or something like that. So Trump, I think, is doing the right thing, but he has to be a little bit careful because if he gets this wrong, it could backfire in a big way.
Yeah, and I think that's the same with every company out there. If you want access to the US economy or the US market, you need to negotiate with Trump or wait him out. But considering the amount of success that's happening with Trump at the moment, I can't see America changing their position in the short term. So I can see this being this way for a very, very long time to come.
I think it's really going to change the entire direction the United States goes for the better, I might say. And I think that will have a flow-on effect to other nations as well. I think it's a matter of time. People don't like to, people are going to badmouth that in the meantime. But again, in any economy, you really need to see 6 months, 12 months go through to see the effect of what's actually going on, to feel the effects of it properly and be able to measure it and test and measure.
Yep. So one thing I've always wanted to do on Edge Radio. So first of all, if you have enjoyed the show and you want to learn more about like different aspects of finance and all that sort of stuff, because we are getting close towards the end of the show, do reach out to Derek at blueskyfactory.com.au. Just remember, blue doesn't have an E in it. That's not a typo. That's just how Derek did it. So I always love seeing arguments from both sides of the spectrum. So I haven't chucked anything on yet because we've just been talking about other issues, but we do have a guy here called Jerry has been coming up and has been putting a few comments into the chat here. So I would love to see if Jerry does have a point he wants to make, or is he just being a troll? So what else is it like?
It might be on our side though. I mean, given how unhappy we all are with the direction of things, he might be one of us. So we've got to be careful about saying he's on the other side.
So it's kind of interesting. I want to hear people's opinions and their stances on things. So it's just some of these like comments. I'm not really sure where they're coming from. I'm assuming he's talking to me because we both wear glasses. You too, Derek. If you really want to be tricky with it, you could argue we're actually five eyes because we've got a brown eye as well. But it's just so I'd love to hear from Jerry. Has he actually got an argument, or is he just being a troll? So, or even a comment or something of
Well,
interesting.
context is everything, and there's no context there. So anyway,
Yeah.
Look, where does the US go from here? Where does Trump go from here in terms of negotiations on? There you go. Need we say more? All right. So getting back to the point here.
Legend. I'm sorry, that's just funny. Way to go, Jerry. Love having you here, mate.
That's context. We asked for context. We've got it.
It's a little early in Perth. I mean, at least I'm in Fiji. I'd have an excuse, but you know.
So yeah, I love it. Like, and again, for the people who are on the left side of the political spectrum, because I'll openly admit I'm right. I don't care. I'm on the right side of politics. We want your feedback from it. So our resident lefty Taz is absolutely awesome, and we have some great discussions with her. But yeah, so it's one of those things where I have a feeling it might be from America, actually, to be honest with you. But
the reality is, it doesn't matter if you're on left or right of politics. I think the heart of people is freedom. They want freedom. They want freedom when it comes to finance. They don't have to work so hard to toil. Freedom from the toil and freedom to make choice. And I think that's what keeps coming up. Whether what your view of politics and which party you think is better or whatever, that boils down to that. And we were never meant to be slaves. We weren't meant to be a slave to a system. We weren't meant to be slaves to a taskmaster. We were meant to live in this freedom and abundance because there's overflow and there's wealth for everyone, and everyone should have room to prosper.
Yep. So just quickly as well, in my opinion, we shouldn't have to pay taxes. We could be like Qatar if we were not just not giving our resources away. Punters Politics covers that one amazingly. The amount of money we lose giving companies.
I agree with that completely. And the environmental argument of let's send our iron ore to China, get it turned into steel, and then buy it back off them. Like all the value add, all the profit gets generated out of another country. That doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things that we should be doing. We should be taxing the resources here in a similar way to the way the Middle East does it, but we just don't do it. And the end result is that people are suffering because there just isn't enough money to pay for the social services that people are expecting to receive from our country.
Spot on. So it's just, I do consider Punter a little bit on the left side of politics, but I do get like, again, just because you're on the left side of politics doesn't mean you can't make a good point. I think he makes some really, really valid points. Like, why are we giving away our natural resources? Like and a friend of mine, Ken, he always argues that all Australians own our natural resources in the ground. Who gave them the permission to sell our resources for nothing?
And this is the argument I've been making for years. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, the Middle East, they've got no taxes." No, that's not true. The Middle East taxes on for most Middle Eastern countries, the taxes on oil and gas is at 50% or more. In Norway, they charge 50% on the exploitation of the natural resources, plus out of your 50% that's left over, you then have to pay corporate tax rates, right? Yeah. So there are ways to be able to improve revenue. Instead, we've got the Labor Party saying it's a good idea to increase revenue by charging tax on unrealised capital gains and superannuation funds, which is going to force people over the threshold to sell the assets. And I think for people that think, well, it's only $3 million, not a lot of people are going to sit in that category, don't forget that this isn't going to be indexed. Again, the way that they're going about trying to raise revenue, it's not that they're raising revenue that's the issue. It's not even where they're spending the revenue for the most part that's the issue. We have some objections, obviously, to some of the net zero stuff. But the issue is that they're trying to raise the revenue in a way that is actually quite hurtful to the everyday person. And they shouldn't be doing that. We have enough resources in Australia for everybody to be able to prosper and survive and get the things that they need.
Spot on. So I think we might wrap this one up here with a final comment from Josh. There is a reason WA Poly is moving to well-paid, zero-effort mining executive jobs. Twiggy and Gina get rich off China. Our Polys sell us out to China for the cushy retirement package, which I hate to say it, considering how much Mark McGowan, the glorious state daddy in WA, is now getting paid by, I think it's BHP and Rio. Follow the money. The evidence is there for itself. So, Derek, amazing show. We are well and truly over what our 45 minutes that we're supposed to be doing. So, any last thoughts before we head out, and then I'll jump across to you, Shaq.
Look, I think always we've got an event coming up on Thursday night. If people want to join us at the Comfort Country Hotel, love to see you there. We're going to be talking about the for the different wealth transfer that is happening right now, the great wealth transfer. And I really think it's about education and getting that, finding where the opportunities are amidst all that's going on. It's easy to get into negativity in terms of, this is bad, that is bad. But within that, there's always great opportunity. And the waves are going to come through in the next few years. It's, a generational opportunities, in my opinion, that could affect generational wealth, not just make a few bob here and there, really have an effect. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about that on Thursday night. I'd love to see people there from 7:00.
All right, and Shaq, over to you, Mr. Muted in the dark there. Just don't smile.
Yeah, sorry, I am in Fiji at the moment, as you guys know. I'll be back in Australia tomorrow. Look, I'll just say that it's not just West Australian politicians, it's politicians all over the country, it's politicians all over the world. I'll just reiterate things that I've said last year. It's one thing to whinge about it and get all upset and flustered about things when they don't go your way or the country seems to be going in the wrong direction. But I say focus on yourself, focus on your family and your wealth, and try to make sure that you can live the best life that you can without getting too caught up in all the bullshit that we're used to from the pollies.
Spot on.
Did I swear on air again? I shouldn't have, sorry. The censors will get me later.
Oh, Shaq's in the red light district again. On this one...
I'm in Fiji, not being there, bro.
There is no red light district in Along, apparently. So we're going to wrap up here before the conversation degrades even further. This has been Edge Radio, the Greater Wealth Mondays. You can listen live. Now, the other cool thing is we did actually get a FM license last year. We've had all sorts of troubles with the transmitter, so we ended up biting the bullet and buying a brand new transmitter. It should arrive in about 5 weeks or so. So hopefully in the next 2 months, we will actually be broadcasting on 87.6 FM out of East Perth. So while you're stuck in peak hour traffic in Perth, you'll be able to listen to Derek's smooth, soulful voice on Mondays out 1 o'clock live on air in your car as well. So on that one, when I wrap it up, I hope you've had a great show. Keep your questions coming in. And if there's any questions that we missed on our personal pages or anything that didn't come up, we will tackle them during the week. Awesome. Anyway, and make sure to look up Derek at blueskyfactory.com.au. Thanks, guys. Cheers, Derek and Shaq.
Bye, guys.